So the YMCA education series is free and open to the public, so we encourage you to spread the word and invite your family and friends to participate. We host approximately 6 to 8 of these programs a month, varying in different topics. This program will last about an hour. You might find that you have questions during the presentation. We will be happy to answer these questions. Feel free to put them in the chat box, but otherwise we'll answer these questions at the end of our talk today. Thank you for joining us. And now I would like to introduce Matt Margolis from Margolis Weldon. He will be talking to us today about understanding Medicaid and how to protect assets legally. And he will discuss the ins and outs of Medicaid for nursing homes and supportive living facilities and why it's never too late to protect your assets. Welcome, Matt.
Hey there. Good morning. And thank you, Pam. So here we are on this nice snowy morning. I was telling Pam, thankfully we are doing this via Zoom because I'm sure nobody would show up to the YMCA if we did this in person today. Just one of the added benefits of living in a Zoom world. So just to give you guys a little bit of background on me and our practice, my name is Matt Margolis. My partner Lauren Weldon and I have what I call a boutique elder law and estate planning practice in downtown Park Ridge. We assist families of all shapes and sizes with their planning, whether it's wills and trusts, powers of attorney, working with individuals as young as 18, putting powers of attorneys together for kids going off to college, all the way up to working with older individuals to get all their estate planning done. And then just because you're an older individual doesn't mean that you necessarily need an elder law attorney, or that you need elder law work. You just might need some estate planning. But I would argue that meeting with an elder law attorney versus just your standard estate planning attorney is not a bad thing, because we do take certain things into account and look at things through a different lens, whether it's me or somebody else. Other half of our practice, other than estate planning, is dedicated to elder law. We have a strong focus on helping people apply for Medicaid and protect assets. A lot about what we're going to be doing a lot of the work that we'll be talking about today during this presentation. I think that's about it. So I see everybody's muted themselves. That's great. It's always helpful just to kind of prevent any background noise. There may be background noise on my end. I've got a 2.5-year-old here, an almost 3-year-old. So, sometimes she's not always happy and she might scream in the background. So just throwing that out there. If you have any questions, I will open up I'm gonna have the chat box visible on my end. If you have any questions, feel free to put in the chat box. It might just be a little bit easier. Although we do have a really small group. So if you have a question, you can also show me your screen and just kind of, motion to me that you have a question, and I'm happy to, pause, or I might give you one of these just to let me finish my train of thought. And then I'm happy to answer it. As long as the questions are general. I really try to avoid any really personal questions. Again, even though we've got a small group with at least one other person on here, I prefer not to get into anything personal for anybody. All right, so how to protect assets, understanding Medicaid and how to protect assets legally. So first, I think I want to make sure that we're all on the same page regarding what Medicaid is. There's a lot of confusion, and I know there's a lot of confusion because people prospective clients or clients that we work with over the years tend to come in, and some have a very good understanding as to how Medicaid works, and some have this idea that Medicare and Medicaid are the same thing. People think that Medicare pays for long-term care costs. So let's sort of get some of this out of the way. Medicare is health insurance. Okay, it's going to be health insurance for those 65 years and older. Individuals younger than 65 might be eligible for Medicare if they're disabled, and they've been defined as disabled by the Social Security Administration. And then in some cases, they can get Medicare prior to age 65. But for most of the population, we will not be eligible for Medicare until we turn 65. And then in a lot of cases, when we turn 65 and we get Medicare, we will also, in a lot of cases, get a Medicare supplement, okay? Because Medicare will cover majority of our medical bills, but there'll be some bills and some charges in the hospital that won't be covered by Medicare. And so it's really advantageous to have a Medicare supplement of some sort. I'm not going to go into any detail on supplements. If anybody has any interest in exploring that, you can always reach out to me. And I've got a great person I can connect you with who knows supplements in and out and has helped a lot of my clients actually switch from the supplements they're currently getting and get new ones, because sometimes people don't really realize that they are paying for a supplement and for aspects of it that they really don't need. And they might be able to get one a little bit cheaper, or in some cases they might be spending too little and they have a supplement in place that's really not appropriate for them, and it won't cover certain things that can arise. And yeah, it's a little bit cheaper, but they might benefit from having a different supplement. So, again, these are things that a lot of people just don't realize. We don't know. We might meet with one person, they set us up with something, and then we don't really question it. So just something to consider. But Medicare, sorry, back to what I was saying. Medicare is insurance. Okay, Medicare does not pay for long-term care costs. That's where Medicaid kicks in. Now, Medicare does pay for a very short period of long-term care costs. I don't even call it long-term care costs. Medicare pays for rehab, okay, in some situations. So if an individual is hospitalized and they're in the hospital for 3 overnights, inpatient status, okay, 3 overnights inpatient status. So this is not, they can't be under observation. They can't be in the hospital for any other reason. They need to be classified as inpatient for 3 overnights. If they are then discharged to a rehab facility, typically rehab is done in a skilled nursing facility. So if they're discharged to a skilled nursing facility for rehab, Medicare will cover the first 20 days 100%. Okay. And then for up to an additional 80 days, so for a total of 100, for up to an additional 80 days, Medicare will cover 80%. Okay. People are not guaranteed to get an additional 80 days covered by Medicare. A lot of people think they're going to, a lot of people have this idea that, oh, we're going to get 100 days covered by Medicare. And I can tell you that I've been doing this for just about 11 years now. And I can probably count on one hand how many clients I've worked with that have gotten 100 days of covered by Medicare in a rehab facility. The reason for that is, and just to clarify, so the first 20 days, Medicare covers 100%. The remaining up to another 80 days, Medicare covers at 80%. In most cases, if somebody has a true Medicare supplement, the Medicare supplement will pick up that other 20%. And so a lot of people will not be out of pocket at all for that rehab, right? Because Medicare will cover 80%, their supplement will cover the other 20. However, this is where people need to be educated on the type of supplement they have. In some cases, there are some supplements that do not cover that other 20%. I can tell you that if somebody has a Medicare Advantage plan, there's a gap where the plan will cover the additional 20%, from days like 21 to 40 or something like that. And then from days 41 to 60 or 41 to 65, the person will be out of pocket for that 20%. And then, days 61 or 65 or 66 to 100, their Advantage plan will kick in again and cover the additional 20%. So again, we need to be educated on these supplements and these Advantage plans we have. We need to understand how they work. So Medicare will cover rehab, but the reason why, Medicare will stop. So let's say it's day 37 and the nurse, the rehab center, has a care meeting with the family, and they say, hey, wife or husband or son or daughter, this person that we're treating here is just not making any progress anymore. They have, and the term that they'll typically use is they've plateaued. Okay. We're trying to get them to rehab, we're trying to get them better, but they're just not, either they can't, right? We've determined that they truly can't, really do much more for themselves, or they're just refusing to try, right? Some people just, and I don't mean this in a bad way, and I'm not putting anybody down for it, but some people just give up. It's too hard for them. And they just really can't really continue on with the rehab. And so if the individuals at this rehab facility feel this person has plateaued and they're not making any more progress, what they'll do is they'll a lot of times tell the family and say, listen, in 3 days or 5 days or a week, Medicare is going to stop paying for their rehab. And so and so can stay here, but they're going to be a long-term resident, and the cost will be $280 a day or $350 a day. Your average nursing home cost, sort of like in the greater North Shore, where I would think most of us are, we're probably looking at somewhere between $9,000 and $12,000 a month for the monthly cost at a skilled nursing facility. And so the facility will say, yeah, Medicare's gonna stop paying, and if they want to stay here, they can, but they're going to pay privately. And again, that could be at day 37, that could be at day 25, that could be at day 68. And so in some cases, the family might feel that person still is making progress, so they can, they can petition the nursing home, and if they don't agree, then they can always appeal to Medicare and kind of go through that process. And it can be difficult, but it doesn't mean that they can't. It doesn't mean that they can't try to get more rehab covered by Medicare. But again, I just want to be clear that is really the only long-term, somewhat long-term care benefit that Medicare will cover. Okay, otherwise Medicare is really just going to be insurance. Medicaid, which we are going to talk about, which we'll get into right now, is really the what will help pay for long-term care in a nursing home or a supportive living facility. Those are the two types of places in Illinois where Medicaid will cover it, will potentially cover it. So most people, I think, are familiar enough with the term nursing home, right? Sort of that top level of care, right? So we look at independent living, and that's where we are pretty self-sufficient. In some cases, people move into independent living and they might need a little help, and the place that they're moving into might offer some help. But independent living, we're able to pretty much handle most of our activities of daily living. Sort of the next level up would be assisted living, right? I need help with some things, not everything, but I definitely need some help with some activities of daily living. And then skilled nursing is really where, we need quite a bit of help. We're gonna need help with most activities of daily living, whether it's getting dressed, showering, going to the bathroom, eating, feeding, having somebody feed us, transferring, getting up from in and out of the bed or a chair. And so a supportive living facility in Illinois is going to be more similar to assisted living as far as the type of care that it will provide. Right. So it's sort of like I'm not totally dependent on somebody else, but I probably need some help with some activities of daily living. And there's a spectrum, right? There's people in supportive living that are actually very self-sufficient. And there's people in supportive living that need a little, quite a bit more help. Every supportive living facility in Illinois, every place that is called a supportive living facility accepts Medicaid. Every single one. On the flip side, when it comes to nursing homes, not every single nursing home takes Medicaid. Some do and some don't. I also sort of want to dispel the myth, do away with the myth or the idea that just because a nursing home takes Medicaid means it's a bad facility. The reality is, in most cases, what makes a nursing home good, quote unquote, good or bad or desirable or not desirable, in a lot of cases, it depends on the staff. So, yes, due to funding, you might find that some nursing homes that take Medicaid might not look the prettiest. And those that don't take Medicaid and that are 100% private pay might look really nice, right? There might be, mahogany armoires when you walk in and marble countertops. But, a place that's aesthetically pleasing doesn't always equate to a place that has very good care. And so I think I just want to make sure everybody's conscious of that, because, there's a lot of places on the North Shore that take Medicaid. I don't want to say that there are more that take Medicaid than not. I don't know if that's a true statement, but there are a lot. In our practice, the majority of clients that we will meet with will end up in a place that takes Medicaid. And that's just typically because people that have tons and tons of money don't necessarily need to hire an elder law attorney, right? They're not concerned about Medicaid. They're not concerned about protecting assets, some of the things that we're going to talk about today. But for those that, for those of us where, money doesn't grow on trees, we understand that the money might run out at some point, and we might need to consider a place that takes Medicaid. And so again, I just want to be really clear that just because a place that takes Medicaid does not mean it is a terrible place to move into. The reality is that, there's really, I think most of us would agree, nobody's moving into a nursing home for the most part saying, oh my gosh, I can't wait to move into this nursing home. Like, that will be amazing. And typically no adult child is saying, God, I would love to move my parents into a nursing home. It seems like the best thing in the world. They might say that for other reasons, right? Because mom and dad aren't doing well at home, et cetera. But, if given a choice, most of us would want to stay at home in general over a nursing home. That's just a reality, right? So Medicaid, two types of places in Illinois that take Medicaid: supportive living, skilled nursing. When we look at Medicaid, let's talk about, sort of what we need, what our financial situation needs to look like so that we can apply for Medicaid. So if I'm a single individual applying for Medicaid, I can have no more than $2,000 in my name. Okay, this is $2,000 total assets. This isn't like, oh, Matt can have a house plus $2,000. No, I can have $2,000 total. Okay, and that's $2,000 total as it relates to what's in my checking accounts, savings accounts, money markets, retirement accounts. Okay, some people think that money in an IRA or 401k is exempt from Medicaid. It's not. Cash value of a life insurance policy is considered part of my assets for Medicaid purposes. All of that is considered. All of that has to be less than $2,000. Then we look at my income. Okay, Medicaid says, Matt, so this is a little bit different if I'm going into a nursing home or a supportive living facility. If I'm going into a nursing home, Medicaid says, Matt, the $2,500 a month from Social Security that you get, that's great. You get to keep $30 of that. Okay, every month you get to keep $30 of your Social Security. You can also continue to pay for your Medicare supplement. Okay, we'll let you do that. And it makes sense to keep it. You'll hopefully realize this as I continue to speak, but it's not going to cost me anything to keep that supplement. In the end, it's not going to hurt me to keep that supplement and pay for it. So you can keep $30 a month for spending. You can pay for your Medicare supplement, but then the rest of your income is going to come to the nursing home. Okay, that's going to be what we call your patient liability. If I'm in a supportive living facility, rather than me getting to keep $30 a month, I can keep $90. Okay, so that's really the only difference between supportive living and skilled nursing for the most part. And there's a couple other nuances, but to be very upfront, everything I'll really talk about from now on will be really more in line with the skilled nursing facility. And then the last thing is that Medicaid is a 5-year look-back period. So if I go to apply for Medicaid, Medicaid wants to see, what did I do with my money over the last 5 years? And I'm going to need to produce 5 years of bank statements. Okay, 60 months worth of bank statements for every single account I have. If I've got 3 checking accounts, 60 months of statements for all 3 accounts. 2 savings accounts, a brokerage account, a money market account, a CD, an IRA, 60 months worth of statements for all of these accounts. What the state is looking for is, in their words, did I make any transfers for less than fair market value? We can all use the term, did I gift any money? Okay, that would be the easier way to say it. Did I gift any money? But there is a difference between a transfer for less than fair market value and a gift. Okay. If I wrote Pam a check for $15,000 and she didn't perform any services for me, we would all agree that that's a gift. Okay. But if I sold Pam my car that was worth $20,000 and I sold it to her for $5,000, we would not consider that a gift. We would say Pam got a really good deal, right? But what Medicaid would say, Matt, you made a $15,000 transfer for less than fair market value, right? Because I sold a $20,000 asset for $5,000, for $15,000 less than what it was worth. And so in essence, Medicaid would say you gave away $15,000. Okay. So that's the difference between a gift and a transfer for less than fair market value. And we'll talk about how that impacts applying for Medicaid in a second. If I'm married, okay, so if I'm married and I'm applying for Medicaid in nursing home, all the rules that I just mentioned apply still. Okay. I can have no more than $2,000 in my name. I get to keep $30 a month of my income. Excuse me, 90 if I'm in supportive living. And then there's a 5-year look back period. My spouse at home can have $109,560. Okay, 109,560. That's how much my wife can have. She can have $109,560 plus a house plus a car. Okay, it's not like the car can only be, worth $20,000. It could be a $100,000 car. The house can be a $200,000 condo. It can be a $1 million home. Most people, and there's a couple outliers out there, but most people that have $1 million home probably are not applying for Medicaid. Probably not in every case, right? That's because some people, might have bought a house 40 years ago that just over the years has all of a sudden increased in value to $1 million, but they could be living month to month on their income. And these are not crazy. It's not crazy to come across that, even on the North Shore. So we have the idea of what my spouse can have: $109,560, a house and a car. That my spouse can have Medicaid calls it a minimum $2,739 a month of income is what my wife can have. $2,739. Now Medicaid calls this a minimum. So if my income, let me give you an example. Let's say my income is $1,500 from Social Security, and my wife's income is $2,000 from Social Security. Remember, I get to keep $30 a month. I can pay for my Medicare supplement, okay? And then before I give the rest of my income to the nursing home, I can transfer my income to my wife to get her up to that $2,739 number. Okay, so if her income is below that, I can transfer my excess income to get her up to that, but I can't push her over it. There's a caveat. In some cases I can. It's a whole process. We're not going to get into that today, and it's extremely rare. But I can get her income up to that number if she's below it. Now, what if she's above it, right? What if my wife was a teacher and she's got a $6,000 a month pension? Well, then I'm not going to be able to transfer my excess income to her again, for the most part. And actually, even though she'll be able to keep the majority of that $6,000 a month, there is an equation that Medicaid will run that through, and they will basically say that my wife will need to contribute a very small percentage of that to my care every month. Okay, so she actually won't get to keep all $6,000 a month of her income. She'll have to contribute a small percentage of that on top of what I'm already contributing for my income to the nursing home. Again, these situations come up, right? There are people out there that have nice pensions. For the most part, this isn't something that we see extremely often. And then there's a 5-year look back for my spouse as well. Okay, so just because I'm the one technically applying for Medicaid, Medicaid still, my wife and I are married. Medicaid looks at us together as a household, and Medicaid's going. If my wife was making gifts of money to our kids or the grandkids from an account that was in her name only, it will still count against me. Let's talk about how Medicaid treats these gifts. Okay, so if I gave away any money over the last 5 years before I applied, let's just say that I gave away $30,000. Okay, so let's say I gave away $30,000 to my kids, grandkids, whoever. I go to apply for Medicaid, and at the time I apply, I'm down to $2,000 in my name, and my wife's down to the 109,560 in the house and the car in her name. But Medicaid, goes through and they see that I gave away $30,000. So the state basically says, Matt, let's just pretend it's February 1st. Matt, you're approved for Medicaid. But the monthly cost at this nursing home is $10,000 a month. And we see that you gave away $30,000. You're going to have a 3-month penalty. Okay, we're going to take the amount of the gift that you made. We're going to divide it by the monthly cost of care at this place, right? So 30,000 divided by 10,000. And that's how many months you need to wait before Medicaid will kick in, right? So 3 months. So Medicaid will say, even though you're approved, you need to figure out a way to pay for February, March, and April. and then Medicaid will kick in May. Okay, so that's how they calculate the penalty when we give away money. It's the amount of the gift divided by the monthly cost of care. For a supportive living facility, I actually don't have the number in front of me, but for a supportive living facility, it's not the penalty. So it's really one of the only other distinctions between a skilled nursing facility and supportive living facility. For a supportive living facility, there is basically a standard flat monthly amount that they use as the divisor for money that was gifted. I want to say it's right around $5,600 or so. It's based on like a daily rate of, I want to say around $180 a day or something of that sort. And so it's about $5,300 to $5,600. And so even if the supportive living facility is $4,000 a month, or even if it's $6,000 a month, you would use this set divisor to calculate the penalty. Really, again, that's probably the only other difference I can really think of from a Medicaid standpoint between supportive living facility and a nursing home. So that's how we calculate a penalty for Medicaid. And so a few things that I want people to be really conscious of, because these come up all the time. And I think it's really important for people to understand this. Number one, Medicaid will find out, right? So people that think that they're going to like give away money and write checks to their kids, or they're going to give them cash and they're going to pull out all this cash from the bank. Medicaid sees on your bank statement that you pulled out $6,000 of cash, a few months in a row or every other month. They're going to ask how that money was spent. And they will pry and they will dig deep. I promise they will do this. Okay. There are definitely some caseworkers that might not pry as much. There are others that will ask about a check that you wrote for $24.67. So it's all across the board. And so we tell our clients, and I'm sharing this with everybody here, you've got to be conservative. Okay. And so one big thing, number one, is, as we're getting older and if we're not doing so well, it's probably not a good idea to just start gifting away money. Or putting our son or daughter on the title to our house, or gifting the house to our kids and putting the house in their names. There are strategic ways to plan, and we'll talk about a couple options today. But I highly recommend, and whether you reach out to me or another elder law attorney, reach out to an elder law attorney. If these are concerns you're having, don't just start moving things around on your own. It can make things very, very difficult. In some cases, we can't undo what's already been done, right? The harm has already been done. But the biggest thing that I'll bring up, because we see this so often, is the case of the private caregiver. Okay. So people, inevitably, we work with clients and they come to us, and we're helping them with a Medicaid application, and they share that mom or dad is or their spouse has had a caregiver at home for the last 2 years or 3 years or 6 months. And I will say that 8 out of 10 times the clients that we will see they've had a private caregiver. Okay, they didn't go through an agency. And so with a private caregiver, and most people, a lot of people go through private caregivers typically because they're less expensive, right? Most agencies nowadays are probably charging, for sure, I'm going to say no less than $25 an hour. And most of them are probably between $28 and $32 an hour, just to give everybody an idea as to what a caregiver companion costs at home. So, and that's, for a lot of people, that's very expensive, and it's more than they can afford. And so what do? Right? They talk to their friends, their family, their neighbors, and then they get connected with some private caregiver that took care of their uncle or their aunt or their best friend's mom. And this caregiver will work for $15 or $20 an hour. I'm okay with the private caregivers. There are reasons why that I don't like them. Obviously, they're not licensed, they're not bonded, they're not insured. If they steal from you or hurt or are negligent and hurt your loved one, good luck going after them. If they're sick or they want to visit family or take a trip, you typically don't have a backup for them. So there are some reasons why I really don't like them, and obviously I prefer for clients to go through an agency. But again, for financial reasons, I get that not everybody can. However, all I can recommend is that if we have a caregiver at home, have a contract in place, put a written agreement in place. Okay, doesn't need to be overly complicated. I mean, would I recommend that you work with an attorney and probably put something nice together? Yes. Am I going to say you have to absolutely do that? No, I know people won't do it anyway, but you got to put a contract together, because what's going to happen is, and this has happened with clients of ours, they don't put a contract together. Most people, and I'm sure this doesn't come as a shock, most people who have that private caregiver don't put a contract together. Okay, but then what happens is they go to apply for Medicaid, and the caseworker's like, wow, you wrote checks to, Alexandra Mitchell over the last 2 years totaling $78,000. Who is this person? Oh, it was a caregiver. Okay, well, where's the contract? Oh, I don't have a contract. Okay, so you were just gifting money to this person, Alexandra Mitchell, and you're saying it was a caregiver. No, of course it was a caregiver, right? And in every single case, unless our clients are obviously lying to us, which I don't believe they are, it was a caregiver. They just didn't have a contract. But Medicaid's stance will be that they were gifting money to some random person. Literally, their argument will be, in the absence of a contract, they're going to consider it a gift. And then it's an uphill battle, right? Because then we're going to go back to the caregiver. We're going to try to get them to sign an affidavit attesting to the fact that they actually are a caregiver. They're not a friend. They weren't gifted this money. They were providing these services. They worked this many hours a day, or this many, they were a live-in caregiver. They were paid this much an hour, etc. And then, my client, the person applying for Medicaid, has to sign a similar affidavit, or his or her power of attorney if they're incapacitated. It's a big process. And we're not even doing all that, we're not going to be guaranteed that Medicaid's going to allow it. They might still say, sorry, there's no contract. This was a gift. And now that's a tough spot to be in, right? Especially in some cases where somebody doesn't have the money to pay for that penalty that gift will create, right? If it's a single individual and they're down to $2,000 in their name, where's the money going to come from to pay for the next, 5 months, 6 months, 7 months? So again, I'm going to stress it. I am going to say it all the time. Get a contract in place, okay? When we look at the idea of asset protection, okay, I want to spend the rest of the time talking about this just so we have enough time to cover it, and hopefully a few minutes at the end for some questions if there are any. There's really two types of ways we protect assets, okay? In one sense, we can do it from a pre-planning standpoint, right? When people, we can do it when we're being proactive. Now we know, right, that as I would say that the majority of us, and yours truly included, when it comes to certain things, we procrastinate, right? We know that we should do something, right? We know that we need to get this done, but life just gets in the way. And I would say, especially over the last 2 years, maybe for some people over the last 2 years, it's created a lot of extra time on their hands, and they've been able to get a lot done. I would say we've been able to get less done in our house with 2 little kids. So everybody's got their own version of procrastinating. But there is one option where we can do some planning and we can be proactive, okay? And this is where, we're conscious of Medicaid's 5-year look-back period. We're conscious that, we're getting older, and at some point we might have needs, right? In a lot of cases, I'm going to say this typically comes up with individuals where they've had a loved one that, had some pretty serious needs for care needs at the end of their life, right? So, we'll meet with clients where, husband or wife, his or her parents, are either currently in a nursing home, or they were in a nursing home, or they were in memory care, and they saw that they were, needing care for 5-6 years. They spent, $500,000 on care over the last 4 years, 5 years of their life. People don't realize how expensive long-term care is. I mentioned earlier in the talk, mentioning that the average cost of care in a nursing home is probably between $9,000 and $12,000 a month. If somebody needs very consistent 24-hour care at home, you're probably looking at $9,000 to $17,000 or so, because in some cases, if somebody needs for a live-in caregiver, they are entitled to sleep. They're entitled to 8 hours of sleep every day, go figure. And so typically you're paying like a flat rate for a live-in caregiver, and that might be $280 or $350 a day or something like that. But then there are some cases where somebody is a risk to get up in the middle of the night. they might have some form of dementia where they get up and they wander. They get up multiple times in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. They're a fall risk, etc. So there's cases where we've had clients that they needed 2 caregivers doing 12-hour shifts, and they needed a caregiver that was up and alert 24 hours a day. And in that case, you're paying 24 hours a day times $28, $30 an hour. I mean, do the math. That can be $720 a day. That can be $15,000 to $20,000 a month. So we've seen everything on the spectrum. So some people, again, they've had these experiences in their lives, and they know that, and again, these are also typically people that people aren't coming to me with millions of dollars saying, hey, Matt, how do I protect my assets so I can get on Medicaid? It's typically people that have, they have a house, maybe they have a couple $100,000, maybe they have less than that. And their concern is, if either my spouse or I need long-term care, we don't want to impoverish the other person, right? I don't want my wife to have to spend all the money down to $100,000 and have her be left with that. Especially what if something happens to me when I'm younger and my wife's still young, right? I mean, there are situations where we meet with clients where there's a loved one going into a nursing home, in their early to mid 70s, and their spouse that's at home could be living for another 20 years. And so from a proactive standpoint, we can, there's certain planning we can do, okay? And without going into tons of detail as to the intricacies of the planning, there's a certain type of trust we can create, okay? And I give a talk through the why. I mentioned this at the beginning, but I'm a pretty regular speaker. I speak the first Wednesday of every month at 9:15 on a different topic, although some of these topics definitely get rerun, just so you know. But and so one of the topics is wills and trusts, and so most people that are familiar with trusts are probably more familiar with with a revocable living trust, which is the most common type of trust out there, right? And most people that put a revocable living trust in place are doing so to prevent their estate from going through probate. And then you've got another percentage of the population that isn't just concerned about probate, but they have a large enough estate where they're using trusts to help avoid paying estate taxes or to pay less estate taxes. But that revocable trust doesn't protect our assets if somebody sues us. That trust doesn't protect our assets if we're looking to apply for Medicaid. It's not like I can say, oh, hey, state of Illinois, yeah, I've only got $2,000 in my name, but I've got, $1 million in my revocable living trust, but that's on the side, right? That's in a trust. You can't touch it. No, they can't. Okay, a revocable trust is from a Medicaid standpoint, it's just as if it was in my name. Okay. And with a revocable trust, the reason why people like these so much, in addition to the protection from probate and the assistance in avoiding estate taxes, is that revocable trusts are flexible. I can be what's called the trustee. And so if there's bank accounts and real estate owned by the trust, as the trustee, I can manage all of it. I can still do what I want with all of my assets. No different than what I did with everything I had prior to putting a trust in place. And the trust is for my benefit during my lifetime. Okay, so I can pay my bills and do whatever. Literally, I tell clients all the time, the biggest difference when they create a revocable living trust is that now their accounts and their bank statements are going to say, the Matt Margolis Trust, Matt Margolis Trustee, and then my address, rather than just Matt Margolis and my address. That's really it. Operates off my social security number, etc. If we want to protect assets from Medicaid, okay, and we're conscious of the 5-year look-back period. So if we're doing this type of work from a pre-planning standpoint, from a proactive standpoint, we ideally have more than 5 years on our side before we're ever in a situation, before we ever believe we'll be in a situation where we need to apply for Medicaid. Okay, because if we're going to move any money around, it needs to be 5 years before we apply, right? Otherwise, there'll be that penalty that we discussed. And so what we'll do is we'll create what we call a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust. It's an irrevocable trust. The trust works a little differently. Again, for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into tons of detail, but to give you a quick example, I can't be the trustee. I can't be in charge of this trust. So in most cases, I'm going to have an adult child be the trustee. Similarly, I can't be the beneficiary of this trust during my lifetime. So on its face, the trust is for the benefit of my 2 kids. And then, of course, when my wife and I pass away, Everything in the trust will go to our 2 kids equally, very similar to what our revocable trust would have said. And so what happens is, we want to protect assets. So we transfer, let's just say we take $100,000 in a checking account and we retitle that account. Or I retitle that account from Matt Margolis to the Matt Margolis Medicaid Asset Protection Trust. That transfer starts the 5-year clock. Okay. All right. That starts the 5-year clock to look back for Medicaid, right? Ideally. So it's not the date I create the trust. I might sign the trust on February 2nd, 2022. But if I don't retitle that account until June of 2022, the 5-year clock starts in June, right? That's when the money in my bank is actually being retitled from my name individually to the Matt Margolis Asset Protection Trust. Once the account has now been retitled to that asset protection trust, I can no longer have control over it, right? My daughter is the trustee. She'll manage the account. And her and my son are the beneficiaries of it. Okay. What does that mean? That means that if I ever need any access to that money, either myself or my wife, if one of us ever needs to access any money in that account, because let's just say the money that we kept in our name has gone down over time, right? And inevitably it will. Over time, our assets will decrease. All right, we will typically be, especially in our later years, we might get to a point where we're spending more money that's coming in. And so at some point, if we need to access any of the money in that account, we can go to our daughter, the trustee, and say, hey, daughter of ours, we need $10,000, okay? And so our daughter would write a check from the trust to either herself and our son, and they would deposit it in their personal account. Once they deposit in their personal account, they could turn around and say, hey, mom and dad, I love you so much, here's $10,000. And so we still have access to the money, but we have to access it through our kids. And so this planning is really only going to be done in situations where we have people that are very close to us that we trust, that we have the utmost trust in. Because based on the language of the trust, my daughter would be doing nothing wrong if she wrote a check to herself or her brother and they kept the money and they didn't give it to us because the trust says it's for their benefit. Okay, so we have to be very careful. There's situations that have come in our office where we've met with people where they've told us and been very upfront that they don't have a great relationship with their kids or they don't have any kids, but I've got a niece or a nephew that I talk to once every couple of years. This type of planning doesn't necessarily work for everybody, even for those people that really want to do it. If we don't have the right people that we're close to, it just can't work. For multiple reasons, this doesn't work. In some cases, we'll have clients that will name a bank or a trust company as trustee of their trust. It doesn't work. That doesn't work in this situation. Okay. And so all I want to get at here, and I want to make sure I'm clear, is that we have the ability to set aside some assets, as long as we're doing so more than 5 years in advance, so that if I ever need to apply for Medicaid more than 5 years from the date that I transferred that money to the trust, that money's off the table. Okay, that's not money that would have to get spent down before I could apply for Medicaid. Okay, that money would be totally separate and Medicaid wouldn't even consider it. Okay. The last thing I want to discuss is sort of what we would do in a more crisis situation. Okay. So in a more crisis situation, when we look at, more crisis planning is what we kind of call it in our office. This is where, and a lot of people kind of fall into this category, right? Because most of us are reactive, not proactive. Whether we just don't want to think about it, we don't know that we just don't know. We don't know that there's an option to do any kind of proactive planning, right? Most people, arguably, if they don't attend a talk like this, or they don't talk to somebody else that engaged in this kind of planning, or they don't look things up on the internet, most people just don't realize that there's an option to do any planning to protect assets, especially with what I'm going to talk about right now, because most people come to us and they don't have 5 years on their side, right? I'm meeting with a woman and her husband's in rehab. The rehab days are going to end in a week, and then he's going to need to stay at the nursing home long term, and it's going to be $12,000 a month. We'll say $10,000 a month to make some things easy here. It's going to cost $10,000 a month to keep him there. And she's concerned. She's concerned because they've got $300,000 in the bank, a house, and a car. And she's concerned that they're going to have to spend about $200,000 on his care And obviously her just regular monthly expenses, not just his care, but her monthly expenses included. And then once she gets down to $110,000, 109,560 in her name and $2,000 in his name, then she can apply for Medicaid. And so, and in most cases, people come to us and they're like, what they don't realize is that we can still potentially do some planning at the last minute. Now, there's other factors as to why it might not work, and I don't want to go into all of that. Obviously, every situation is a little bit different. But what we potentially have the ability to do in some of these cases is protect roughly half of what this couple has above the $109,000 that Medicaid allows the spouse to keep. Okay. And so if this couple has, let's just say they've got $310,000 to make it easy, right? And we know that she can keep 109 and he can keep 2. So they can keep about 110 between the two of them. And they've got 310. And so if they do nothing at all, they'll spend roughly $200,000, and then the wife can apply for Medicaid for her husband. Well, what we can do is we can do some planning here. And what we can do is we can set up this asset protection trust that I just talked about, right? So that asset protection trust I just talked about using in a pre-planning scenario, we can now use it in a crisis planning scenario. And so what we do is we take that trust and we take about half the assets that we have above the 109,000. Okay, so if we got $310,000 in this example, there's about $200,000, what I will say is at risk, so to speak. So we'll take roughly 100,000, and we'll gift it to that asset protection trust. And it's a gift, right? We know that we're basically on the verge of applying, we're on the doorsteps of applying for Medicaid. And we know that in gifting $100,000 to that trust, Medicaid will give us a 10-month penalty, right? Because it's a $100,000 gift divided by the $10,000 a month cost of care at this nursing home, right? We gave away 10 months worth of care. But remember, we still have another $100,000 we have to do something with. So this other $100,000, what we do is we put it into a Medicaid compliant annuity. Now I'm going to be very clear and give my disclaimer here. My partner and I are not financial advisors. We are not insurance licensed. Okay, we do not sell any financial products. We don't sell annuities. We don't sell life insurance policies. We don't sell anything. And the individuals that we put our clients in touch with that can help them with these things, we do not get any kind of commission or kickback. All right, disclaimer done. There is a Medicaid compliant annuity which serves a very specific purpose here. Okay, so we take that other 100,000 and we put it in this Medicaid compliant annuity. This is not a gift because this annuity is in my name or in my wife's name. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to give this $100,000 to the insurance company and say, hey, insurance company, here's $100,000. And they're going to turn around and they're going to pay it back to me. Okay. Let's say I'm the one going on Medicaid in 10 equal monthly installments. And there's really no investment here. Okay. So clients always ask, oh, if we put $100,000 in the annuity, how much are we going to get back? Maybe $100,050. You might make $50 on it or $100 on it. And in addition to that, because the insurance company is holding on to the money for such a short period of time, they're going to charge you $1,000 or $1,500 or $2,000 just for the privilege of setting up this annuity. The investment, though, is the $100,000 that we're going to protect in that trust. Okay, that's the investment. That's what I try to tell my clients. And so here's how it works, right? We gift the $100,000. Let's go back and kind of put it all into perspective. The clients have 300. The wife, because she's staying at home, she's the community spouse. She gets to keep 100, 109,560. We'll call it 100. Then there's 200 left. Of the 200 left, we put 100 into this trust, which is going to be protected for her, right? We talked about this earlier. She can still access it through her kids, through a friendly trustee. Okay. And if she never needs access to the money, then that's something that she can pass on to her kids or her grandkids. Okay. But when she made that gift to that trust, it triggered a 10-month penalty, $100,000 gift to the trust divided by a $10,000 a month cost of care. But then we take the other $100,000 that's left and we put it into this Medicaid compliant annuity. By doing that, we are now at a point where my clients can apply for Medicaid because the wife is down to $109,000 in her name. Husband's down to $2,000 in his name. She's got the house and the car in her name. And we apply. And just so you know, that money in the annuity, that's not considered an asset, because now we've turned it into an income stream, right? It's going to make 10 equal monthly payments. And so the way it works is those 10 equal monthly payments will come to the husband who's in the nursing home. Those monthly payments coupled with their household income will be enough to pay the nursing home for the 10 months that the penalty is in place, right? Because there was a 10-month penalty given. So for 10 months, the annuity is paying them, coupled with their income, they're going to pay the nursing home. After month 10, there's nothing left in the annuity. There's no money left. And whether the Medicaid application has been approved or not, that gentleman in the nursing home is going to be called Medicaid pending. And their only financial responsibility to the nursing home will be whatever, a certain portion of his income, as we talked about earlier, right? Because he'll get to keep $30 a month of his income. His wife gets to keep $2,739 a month of her income. And so there might be a patient liability that's due to the nursing home, but that's all it is then due to the nursing home after month 10. Meanwhile, wife was able to keep her $109,000 house and the car, and we were able to set aside an additional $100,000 in that asset protection trust. I feel like I'm normally not this good with time, but that's about the end of the material that I have. And so, I've got until 10:15. If there's any questions that anybody has, I would be happy to entertain them, as long as they're fairly general. I'll put my contact info in the chat box in case anybody wants to follow up and has any questions. But I definitely appreciate everybody attending this morning and staying muted, and hope you got some good information today.
Anybody have a question for Matt?
I don't. This is Scott Sandroff. I just want to thank you, Matt. It was very informative.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate it. Thanks for joining.
Sure.
Hi, I have a question. So in the scenario you just presented with the annuity, so basically what you did is you protected half of it, right? Because half of it, instead of all of it being at risk, only half of it was?
Correct. So half of whatever's at risk. So because Medicaid allows the spouse in that example to keep the $109,000, I always tell clients, I don't need to do anything special for a spouse to keep the $109,000. What we can do is we can protect roughly half of what they have above that. And in some cases, it tends to be more than half, because it's all based on their income, and there's a lot of factors, and it's, the person that we work with that puts the annuity together kind of runs all these financials through an algorithm. And so there's some cases where, a couple has $300,000, we might be putting, 125 in the trust, and then 75 goes in the annuity. And it's only 75 that has to go in the annuity because they've got enough income coming in each month that the annuity plus their existing income is enough to pay that $10,000 a month bill. So yeah, every situation is a little different, but I always say pretty much at the worst, we can probably protect about 50%.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Last chance for questions. All right. That concludes our YMCA Education Series presentation. On behalf of the YMCA, North Suburban YMCA, and the YES Series, we thank you for supporting. Matt will be talking next month on March 2nd, 9:15, proactive, not reactive. He'll be talking about importance of planning ahead when you have a chronic medical condition. Stay tuned for that. Our next talk is on Friday, February 11th, why simple habits are key to eating better for life. So it's about nutrition. Programs like this are free and open to everyone in the community. If you want to donate, go to northsuburbanymca.org and you can donate there. Thank you, everyone, and we hope to see you next month for Matt's talk as well. All right, bye.
Bye.
Great day, guys.